And one of the things I need to do is get this belly tank set up. I had welded up the neck for it for the fuel inlet neck, the filler neck, but I'd taken the old one out and I've got that hole opened up. But there's a bung in there for a quick drain that's fiberglassed in at the bottom there on the drain, and that's aluminum, and that's pretty well corroded out, so I'm going to have to grind that thing out of there. And I've got a piece of hex brass bar stock that I'm going to turn down and make a new bung for that. One of the things on this is they just had a round bung fiberglassed in there and then that quick drain put in there, and there's no way to get the quick drain out to clean it up or anything, or to replace the seals. I should say it's hard to do because you can't get a wrench on that bung, twist on it after it's set there a while and all the gookumpucky hardens up, and it's hard to get off there, and you wind up twisting that whole thing out of the fiberglass. So I'm going to make one out of brass, which shouldn't be as prone to corrosion as that aluminum one was, and I'm going to have it stick out just a little bit with a hex portion on it so I can get a wrench on there to hold it for putting that quick drain in and taking it out to clean it up periodically. The other thing, again, is a sore spot, is these tubes here. They've got tubes in there that go through for the flying wires when it's on floats, and they're aluminum, and they're just bare aluminum, and they're corroded too. The geometry on this thing changes on this wider fuselage, and with different types of floats. I'm putting Edo floats back on it, so that's going to be the same, but I may want to put a different float on there sometime in the future. Anyway, I'm going to take those out of there and redo those and put a little different deal in there for those flying wires. So I'm going to have to cut the top off of that, out of that, so I can get access in there to grind out all of that fiberglass and stuff and put new stuff in there. So since it's nice and warm, we'll work outside anyway to keep the mess down in the basement here. We'll get started at that. I cut out a section of the top of this fuel tank so I can get access in here to these tubes and better access in down there to where that boss is, and then I can get in underneath here when I put that fuel tank filler neck in and get underneath here and gob fiberglass in there. It had a little hand cover here that they had in it from the factory, but that really doesn't give me enough room to get in there to do what I wanted to do. And then there's baffles in here all over the place, so I couldn't get access to these tubes from that hole. So I thought I could just go ahead and cut a whole big chunk off of this top, but they've got these baffles and this top supported in here in two different spots with these big gobs of fiberglass resin. So I just cut out this, which gives me access to these two tubes. I may have to cut out a large portion over on this side to get down there to the other side of that boss there. I don't know. We'll see how it looks when I get it cleaned up. Oh, I used a Dremel tool with a reinforced cutoff wheel on it, and I cut it at an angle so it slopes this way, so this piece that I cut out won't fall back down in the hole. It kind of be supported, and we'll have to go underneath that and make a lip with some fiberglass to put it back together, to glue it back together, but I'll worry about that when the time comes. And I also used my cheap Chinese dust mask. It worked real good for that. Well, now I'll try to figure out what to do. I've got to take these tubes out of there and clean those holes out, and the same thing with that bung down there. I took a little battery operated Sawzall and cut notches in that bushing there in the bottom for the quick drain. And then I cut these tubes that go across here where the flying wires go. I cut those off near this outside edge, and where they go through that little bulkhead in the middle, that little Sawzall. That worked really good for that. You can get it in down in the tight places. But then I had to grind all that fiberglass and metal out of there that was left. And my little Dremel tool, I've used it before for doing that, but it's just, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to do it, and it's kind of hard on it. So I brought it down here to the shop and set it up. It's such a nice day. I just set up outside here and hooked my air hose up out here. Got my die grinder and a rotary file and just ground all that aluminum out of there until I got down to the fiberglass, and then I ground it out. I'm going to run 2-inch tubes down through this instead of the 1-inch tubes to give more room, flexibility there for different geometry for for flying wires on different floats and stuff. And I don't know exactly what it's going to be for this airplane or for other floats if I get them. So I got some 2-inch tubes to stick in there, And so I ground all that stuff out of there. Got all the old fiberglass out of there and stuff, and then I put a 80 grit 2-inch sanding disc on a die grinder. Actually, I put it on a different die grinder so I didn't have to switch them back and forth. And I sanded down all that excess fiberglass that was used to glue those in. Got it down to the basic mold here and trimmed out. And then I used the rotary file and ground out the holes to fit the 2-inch tube that's going in there. Now it's oversized because I'm going to glue that in with fiberglass, and it'll fill that pack in around there with resin and probably chopped fiberglass. And then I took a little sanding disc. Actually, I took a fiber disc like a Scotch-Brite and cleaned out the outside here around these and ferried out that paint and the gel coat out of the way, so it makes it easier for the fiberglass resin and stuff to stick on the outside. So that all looks good, and I was just getting ready to clean it all up. Got the vacuum cleaner out and plugged in, and just as I did, the power went out. So everything is sitting here now, ready to go to be vacuumed out and put away for the day. I have to get my slug out that I've got, my piece of hex brass stock, and put it on the lathe to turn out the bushing that's going to go in there for the fuel drain. I did find a crack in the bottom of the tank. I don't know how that happened. It must have dropped on something, it fell on something, and it's got a crack in the bottom of the tank. I'll clean that up and put a patch on that, and then look around and see if I can find any more while we got it off here. Those die grinders, I discovered those when I was working in a aviation repair shop, a welding shop in Anchorage one year in, I don't remember, 92 or 93. I was working in there part-time while the guy was doing a field approval and welding up a new engine mount to put a IO 360 Continental on my Cessna 170. So I was helping out in the shop there, and they had those die grinders. I'd never seen one before. I just fell in love with them. They're a great tool, probably one of my most used tools around here, and I use it primarily with either a sanding disc or a Scotch-Brite type disc for cleaning up corrosion around screw heads and just all kinds of things. It's just really handy. And then of course with the rotary file on it for cutting heavy stuff, you know, like the metal, the steel, aluminum pieces where you've got to hog out some. Work good on this fiberglass. I think maybe I've used the grinding wheels on them that come with them, the grinders themselves. I think I may have used one or two of those once, but I don't hardly ever use those, but I use the heck out of these with the sanding discs and stuff on them. This is a die grinder with a Rolock disc on it, and that's got purple Scotch-Brite, which was a medium density, and that works really good for stripping paint off and cleaning up, brightening up metal before you paint it or weld it, things like that. I just love those little tools. I don't know how I've ever got along with it without it before I discovered them. And I've bought high-priced ones, and I've bought cheap ones. I bought 3 or 4 of those one time in Harbor Freight, the cheap ones, and they last just as long as the high-priced ones, as far as I've been able to tell. And when one of them starts going bad, you just throw it away and grab another one and